Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the IAEM Emerging Technology Caucus presentation on AI for emergency management. I am Sarah Miller. I am the current vice chair slash co-chair of the Emerging Technology Caucus, and I am one of today's presenters. I got promoted. I'm an associate professor of emergency management at Pierce College, chair of their emergency management program and director of the Institute for Disaster Risk Reduction at the college. I got a PhD last year in emergency and protective services, where I did my research on AI, using AI to improve emergency messages. And my co-presenter today is Dr. Ryan Rockabrand, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Sarah, so first of all, you can't say good morning because I am coming to you from Saudi Arabia and it is 7 p.m. and it's the back end of the day, but I am so happy and honored to be here with you. It's always a pleasure when we get together and talk to our friends and cohorts in the profession. I'm the emergency manager now over at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, north of Jeddah, if anybody's been over to this area. Just some amazing stuff going on over here. And I pretty much shadow Sarah the rest of my life, anything else I can do. So whether it's following her with teaching or school or whatever it may be, but really excited for today's presentation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I would be remiss if we didn't start this by acknowledging the loss of one of our dear friends and one of the founders of this caucus, Cheryl Bledsoe. She was an emergency manager for CRESA in Vancouver, Washington, when this caucus was founded, I don't know, close to 15 years ago now. And she was one of our founding members, and she went on to be a 911 supervisor in Clackamas County, Oregon, and she very tragically passed away this last week. But we wanted to honor her because this wouldn't exist if she had not helped found it. And the thing about Cheryl was she brought joy everywhere that she went. So hopefully we bring you a little bit of joy today with this and not too much terror. But I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge her contributions to this caucus and to our profession and to the world in general. So with that, I'm going to have Ryan kick us off.
All right, bandwidth is looking good today. All right, let's do it, Sarah. Thank you very much. And can I navigate here? Next slide. There we go. All right. So listen, here's what we were thinking today, because this is really about you, and we want to take as much time as we can to have some type of discourse as best possible here over Teams. So we're going to power through these slides as quickly as we can. We think it'll take us, don't hold us to it, but right, Sarah, we're going to try and shoot for the first half hour, and then the back half we'll have some great discussion. So we will move fast. Most people retain the first and last 5% of what they learn anyway. So we will send you the slides. You will have everything that we talk about here today. But we're going to talk about the future of emergency management and artificial intelligence. We're going to have some deep dives about the AI revolution and what our role is in emergency management and operational relevance or irrelevance, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. All right, next slide. Here we go.
So there's a critical vulnerability here in humans, right? Humans are fallible. We know that. We know from every after action report we ever read that when things went wrong, it was typically a human who made a decision. And so when we think about systems that are human only driven at this point, they are vulnerable to mistakes, and we have laundry lists of what those mistakes are. When we add AI to this loop, though, we can start eliminating some of those mistakes, both by bringing in more information, processing it more rapidly, but by challenging our inherent bias towards whatever. And bias is not bad, right? Bias just is. We believe things to be the way they are, and sometimes it's hard to get us to change our minds, and AI can force us to look at other points of view and to make better decisions. And so when we look at the future of emergency management, we think about this as a human AI collaboration so that we reduce our reliance on human only systems, and so that we use our humans to deal with the things that really only humans can deal with.
All right, so anybody take a stab. So I put it in the chat, like, this is a free for all, everybody. Come on, jump on in. Tell us your questions, comments, concerns. We'll feed off the chat. We don't want this to just be a waterfall conversation. There's some pieces in here that I think we want to test you. We've got the QA function in there. But anybody that knows what this map is, feel free to type it in the chat. And we're going to talk about AI as it relates to emergency management. But this concern about national security, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive here. But what you're looking at here on the map, these are data centers around the globe. Next slide, Sarah. We're going to talk a little bit about what this means. Everyone's hearing it in the news today. We talk about power consumption. We talk about the AI race and what that means. And I would argue, we see it obviously with Mag 7 and what's happening with big tech, but it is starting to litter itself through every vertical, every discipline, every profession we work with. And you can see here, did I click that, Sarah? I think I got to click it. Just the transition and the investment that's been happening. So I think you turn on the news, every week you'll see another 100 billion, 500 billion, 600 billion, investment in AI and the CapEx investment, with just a huge risk in terms of what the ROI is going to be and what that means in terms of OpEx on the back end for organizations. But just the sheer volume of money being thrown at AI today, you can see over the past couple of 3 years that the US has really led the way to try and dominate in this space. That has massive ramifications for us as emergency managers, just in terms of the operating posture with these big buildings going up, the power draw, the huge investment in nuclear, which we're going to talk about, in order to handle the 40% to 60% ratio in terms of power consumption, the 40% being just for cooling the data centers. But you can see as of August where we landed dominating in this space, and this is going to control how we operate moving forward. Next slide.
So one of the things I didn't note when we started, this is being recorded. You will get the slides. So we're not going to read you all of the slides because we want to get to the discussion bits. So you'll all get them when we're done. When we think about plans, everybody's got a plan on their shelf that's been there for 5+ years that nobody's ever taken off the shelf. That's not effective. So when we think about planning, we're switching that framework from static plans to living systems so that our emergency operations plans, our emergency operations things, are continuously updated based on current information, right? And I know that breaks our planning and approval process, but we need to be proactive in this. Things change more rapidly than our planning process does, and we need to be on top of that and using that to train and exercise and create new planning things, right? And so one of the things that we know about AI is that it is both used for and against us, right? And so we can use AI to combat rumors and false claims. You might know it as misinformation, but misinformation took on a political bent that doesn't help anybody. At the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that people have access to the right information and that we somehow counter the wrong information. AI at this point can pass the Turing test. It is indistinguishable from humans in conversation. However, it also plays to existing bias. If you've been on social media recently, I'm sorry, but also I understand because we all have to go there sometimes. But there is just AI slop everywhere, and that AI slop is designed for you, explicitly for you. You're being served up slop that is designed to make you click, right? And because it is playing to something that you like, something that you're interested in, something you really hate that you might be inclined to click on to see what it says. And the, for lack of a better term, bot farms that do this, if they're getting a couple of pennies every time somebody clicks, and they're making money off of it, right? And it costs them almost nothing. And so one of the things we have to do as emergency managers and as just citizens of the world, we have to be digitally literate. We have to teach digital literacy. We have to help people identify or learn to identify things that are untrue. And that goes for us. Anytime someone shares something that is not true, uh, we all suffer for that essentially. And the press does it. Public safety agencies do it. They don't take a hot second to validate the information that they're sharing. Uh, it's particularly egregious with photos because we can make very realistic photos and images and videos now that are not real. And we use AI to do it. We can also use AI to find them. At the end of this presentation, you'll get a link to join our AI for Emergency Management Discord, where we share these kind of tools. But we have the ability to identify these rapidly, but we also have the ability to teach people to think, right? And that is, I don't want to say it's a lost art, but it is fading quickly. And a good example of that, during the North Carolina floods last year, there was a picture of a guy saving a puppy or a kid or something. I don't remember, but it got shared widely. And then when you stopped for a second and counted, he had 6 fingers, right? It was not the Princess Bride. There was no 6-fingered man. It should not have been shared. The first person to see it should have looked and gone, oh, wait, he has 6 fingers. This is probably not right. And so using our all available clues, we can identify these things, but we can also use AI tools to identify them as well, because public trust is at stake. And at the end of the day, lives are at stake. We're trying to get the right information to the right people at the right time to ensure that we are saving as many lives as possible. You're muted, Ryan.
About now. I switched mics. We're better now? Okay. So so this picture here is for a project over here called Oxagon. This is one of a whole number of projects that are happening here across the kingdom. Part of the reason I was so interested in coming over, just to learn at the advanced technology and things that they're doing. But this concept of architects of automation, these are companies today that are being built for one employee, billion-dollar companies that are startup to completely be automated from front to back. This project here in particular is what they call Industry 4.0. This is a floating industrial complex. 13% of the world's shipping traffic is going to go through this. This is 100% controlled by AI, this port environment. There's a research and development park, just some crazy level next level technology. And this is just one of a whole slew of projects that are happening over here. A good example, but the takeaway was, what does this mean for emergency managers, right? When it comes to the infrastructure requirements, the implications of potential impacts for that infrastructure, operational impacts. There's always going to be some anomaly that comes along. What does that mean to you as a planner if there's no people on site to manage that infrastructure? Next slide.
So one of the challenges we have is we have a capability gap. The current pace of adoption is very fast, and emergency management and government as a whole is very slow to adopt technology for a lot of reasons. Ryan and I did a presentation on this at the IAEM conference last year, and nothing we're saying today is the same as it was 11 months ago when we presented, because everything changes rapidly. And emergency management as a whole is not able to keep up with that. The private sector is rapidly developing AI agents, AI tools, AI functions. Our tech giants are pushing really hard to reduce regulation. But this slow adoption means that the gap we have just keeps getting bigger. And those gaps lead to loss of life, loss of property. And AI growth is leaving emergency managers behind. And one of the things that has to happen here is identifying what you might want to use AI for, and then figuring out if you have the skills to do that. And so that takes a little bit of investigating to understand what we mean. There's a lot of talk about AI prompts when using generative AI, and there's actually a book out there, and I don't remember the exact name, but it's a book full of AI prompts for emergency managers, but it misses the entire point of a prompt. It's a sentence or 2 sentences. And as an example, we just wrote, and I did this with Justin Snare at Prepper. We wrote what is now licensed under Creative Commons, which means anybody can use it for free, a prompt to generate emergency messages. That prompt is 67 pages long. You have to ask yourself if that is something that you want or can devote time to, or that you can learn the skills to do, or that you need to go to someone else for. So you have to do a skills gap analysis. You have to figure out what you want to do, what the skills are that you need to do that now and in the future, who has those skills, and how you're going to upskill. So that plan, that assess what you can do, and then act, right? Reskill or hire employees that have those skills, and then continually do that. This is a thing we should be doing anyway. regardless of whether it's technology driven or not, that we just typically don't do. People get a job, they were qualified for the job when they got the job, and nobody ever checks to see if their skills still match the job as it exists today. And that is a danger across the board for us.
Well, on this, so here we go. So typical org chart, right? How many times, Sarah, do we go into these emergency management environments and say, hey, we got to work on our 207. Let's get our branches and ops set up and figure out what the flop model is going to be and so on and so forth. But here's the takeaway here, folks. If you're not looking at an org chart today and you're not thinking and seeing AI integrated in this org chart, you are behind the power curve. And what I mean by that, somebody brought up a great point about the LLMs and talking about LLMs. AI is kind of like pick your facet, right? But when Sarah and I did this last year, we said, look, be on the lookout for agentic AI, right? Generative AI is something that's very much at the fore right now, but seeing agents turning on certain capability is what you're going to start to see heading into the back end of 25 and proliferate in 26. So what we encourage you to do is YouTube's your best friend when it comes to how to learn about AI, bottom line, right? You can do classes and whatnot, but if you're not watching YouTube all day long about this AI or that, then that's your only kind of, barometer of success when it comes to the speed and acceleration of this. But picture your org charts, pick any particular branch or division, any type of capability that you need, especially if there's a gap, right? If you don't have the bench strength or if you don't have mutual aid capability to fill some of these boxes, think about what an agentic AI solution would be that can meet the mail to deliver on that product. And we're going to talk a lot in the future and back into this about humanoids. But the other thing to factor in is it's kind of a 3-to-1 ratio right now. So if you get one agent in there, you think about you're saving 3 shifts of work. If you're working 8s and you've got people working on a 24-hour op period. So this is a tremendous amount of capability if you're bringing AI agents into the fore. Go ahead, next slide.
So AI is not just another tool because it is ubiquitous, right? You're all using it. And people are using it and they don't even know they're using it. It can be a partner in what we're doing. It's a foundational shift in information processing, right? We have the ability to do this at very large scale, both locally on our own computers or in the cloud on other people's computers. And we have a tremendous capability to do this. We're not always using it for good and useful and helpful purposes, right? But AI changes how decisions are made and it can impact how we deploy resources. And it's not comparable to traditional tools like radio systems or GIS because it is dynamic and it is a learning system and it will, if you're not careful about the AI tools that you use, it might be learning the wrong things. I saw somebody ask about bias in there. We'll talk about that a little bit. Like we're going to come back to as many of these questions as we can. Um, but you have to have a clear business case, right? Just playing around with AI is a waste of resources and tools. You need to be purposeful about it so that you know what you want to achieve. Like my ultimate goal right now would be for my organization to use AI to process expense reports. They are the bane of my existence. I hate them. They are time consuming and cumbersome, and it is a perfect use of AI to free me up to do other things, right? That is a thing that could be achieved. But you can't, a lot of people are using it superficially. They're using it to make an exercise, but that exercise isn't based on their plans, their community. They're just using random AI tools to do it. And so you need to be purposeful in it so that it's actually solving a problem that you have. And technology tends to be chase the shiny. We got the thing because everybody else got the thing. Everybody got drones initially because their buddy had a drone and then they had a drone and then we had issues with drones because nobody had plans or process or policy for drones. But that was a slow roll sort of tech. And AI is a fast roll kind of tech. And it's exceptionally hard to keep on top of and to figure out what you're actually going to do with it. And so when we think of transformative impacts, which is what we're going to do, we're going to just try and rapid fire through all of these transformative impacts so that we can go to Q&A. Again, we're not going to read the slides to you. You can read them later. We're going to hit the highlights. This slide is in here because When we were at IAEM last year, we talked about robots being everywhere, right? And people having their own personal assistant robots. And some guy in the crowd basically yelled BS on that and said it was never going to happen. And when I went home from that conference, these wheelchairs were in place, or personal mobility devices, I would call them, in the airport in Seattle. And I saw them for the first time. And they are robots. People go through security, they put their suitcase in the robot, they sit in the robot, they pick their gate, and the robot drives them to the gate. It is a robot that is in real time changing people's access to things. And this is where we are now. This is where we're going. And so when we think about this, we're thinking about what is happening right now and what is going to be happening very, very soon. And AI and robots are ubiquitous. You don't have robots without having AI in this space.
So we're going to get into really rapid fire here, right? I'm looking at the clock, Sarah. We're close. Okay. So listen, we usually do a little segment here. We do this deeper dive on like kind of 10 buckets, 10 areas within emergency management that we see some application and some big wins. Again, we're not going to read the slides, but um, you got to, going back to Sarah's point about plans, like the HVA has to be a living, breathing animal. It should be culling data and pulling stuff in real time. And you should see a live score or some type of trend analysis over time, where you're seeing gaps or where you're seeing improvements in your vulnerabilities versus just waiting for the next year to update your model. Those tools are very prevalent today, and we see that as an application that we can use on the front lines as well as in emergency management. Next slide. Speaking of plans, right? Oh my gosh, the plans, more plans about plans, right? So just there, the big thing is turn to life, right? Ingest what you got. I think I put in the chat, we were talking about, IT departments that are pushing back because they're scared or legal or policy, and, general counsel is saying it's too risky, yada, yada. Well, then make the investment in-house, do these things online. You don't need you don't need a supercomputer in order to ingest 12 plans and have it come back and do a quick conflict analysis for you or look for, impacts or improvements. You can run that on a laptop today with a small GPU, right? And so, at least have that capability in-house. There's a ton of ones that are out there that are very simple. You don't need to build, you don't need a system administrator in order to install these things. It's pretty easy to get them up and running and to do some analysis on your plans. Next slide.
So I'll talk a
Go
little
for
bit
it,
about,
Sam.
I'll get it more about planning, right? Grant writing. But I think some of the takeaways of this are that more we could rapidly identify potential mitigation projects. And I think one of the other pieces of this that we're in kind of uncharted space right now is we have lost collectively in emergency management access to federal money, federal grants. And so we're going to be looking to make these use cases to our community, right? We're going to be trying to sell our community on these investments that we have always hopefully had grant access to. But we're going to do benefit cost analysis that is meaningful to our communities, not necessarily meaningful to number crunchers in DC somewhere who are just looking at dollars and cents, right? And so we might be looking at alternate forms of funding. We might be looking at issuing bonds, but at the end of the day, we're using these tools to identify projects and identify um, good backing cases. AI can let us do really good research that is not made up, right? You can use AI to find research that is not hallucinating, and do a better job with these. I also love situational awareness tools in emergency for using AI for situational awareness. We digest a lot of data in an emergency operations center in an incident command post, and 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 we tend to discard outliers, and we've always had that tendency to discard outliers, and that outlier becomes a thing it might be something that's really critically important. And so we can use AI to digest and analyze much more information much more quickly, identify patterns, actions, and make better decisions, but also challenge our existing mindsets and decision making. And so becoming proficient in these tools combined with GIS helps us make better decisions. And I want to just address something I see in the chat. Not everything that you upload becomes public. It entirely depends on what the systems are, what the agreements are, whether you're using free services, right? There's a lot of misconceptions about what happens with your data and who has access to it. And we will talk more about that. Um, there's a lot of ability to gather open source intelligence, right? We always talk about, we want to gather as much information as possible. AI can do that in real time. So we can hit sources of information, news sources, social media sources, gather it all up. It can also simulate what organizations, what populations, what the environment will do related to a disaster. So this simulation piece is better than any simulation tool we've ever had access to, right? We've used HASIS and other things. AI lets us input more data and output better predictions, better predictive modeling for what we're doing. And I think the National Weather Service is such a good example of that. We had a bomb cyclone in November here in the Seattle area, and and the National Weather Service has integrated AI into some of their modeling. It was one of the most accurate forecasts we have ever seen. They had it to the time and the location and the wind speed, and it was a nearly perfect forecast. And that is because we have AI added to that mix, right? It's still being interpreted and communicated by humans, but we get to the answer more quickly and more accurately than we did with the tools that we had.
We're failing miserably, Sarah. We were trying to move fast. Look, I'll power through these as quick as possible. So resource management. So resource management to me is like left a boom. We do this every day. In emergency management, resource management really means allocating shortages, right? That's when we're activated. That's when we got a bad day. We're trying to figure out, who's essential, who's not, how we allocate that stuff. We haven't really tested this yet from an AI perspective in a real complex environment, complex disaster like a COVID or something like that. But this will certainly position us for much better success looking at supply chain and distribution routes and things like that. Next slide. I'm moving fast, Sarah. Here we go. So the next one, resource management, use that. Damage assessment. All right. So I was in China earlier this year. This blew me away. Check out some of these videos, right? So these are AI powered drones that are doing fire suppression on a skyscraper. They use this as a training location. These things, look at the complexity of that disaster, of that exercise, right? They're doing that, but those things are using LiDAR. They're doing heat sensing. They're looking inside the structure to look for mock victims and where people are. And it's not the firefighters fighting the fight; it's the tech fighting the fight and them orchestrating their response from the ground. And that's what we're going to see more and more of moving forward. Next slide, same thing. This blew me away too, right? So see, these are big earth movers. I don't think you can appreciate the size. This is a huge mining operation that we saw over there. They basically took the entire chassis out for the drivers and plopped a massive battery inside there that's being run by AI. And so you got 100 of these massive earth movers that are there's like 0 people on this footprint, right? In this entire site. If there's anything going on as far as excavating or diggers or other type of movers on the ground, those are all being AI and human controlled remotely through a central location. And they're optimizing routes on their own. They're looking at the most efficient path for the battery. They're calculating weights of the load for excavation. Just absolutely insane tech that's all being autonomously run by the technology. The humans are just kind of there observing, waiting to see if there's any anomaly that pops up. Next slide.
So this is my baby right here. Public information is the core of what we do a lot of times in emergency management, and we can't generate enough messages fast enough and get them on all of the places in all of the formats that our constituents need to find them. And so we can it's super easy at this point to create chat bots that are loaded up with your FAQs. Yes, this is generative AI, but is loaded with your information that allow people to interact with your organization in meaningful ways. We're using them to gather open source intelligence so that we can identify rumors and we can continue to address them. And we can do all of that with AI It's still a human in the middle process because we want to ensure that we're actually addressing something that actually exists and it wasn't just forced in there by people who wanted to misdirect. But but messaging, like we're messaging across multiple platforms that require multiple types of messages. We're using we're using our social media platforms, we're using our websites, and we can use AI to simultaneously generate the same information in the correct format for all of those platforms so that we can get it out there in a timely manner. AI lets us do really great work around exercises, right? So this is actually a beautiful place for it. You take your plans, you put them into a purpose-built AI, you ask it to first deconflict your own plans, and then you can use it to build fully developed exercises, complete with measles and injects and all of the things we need that are based even on like your after action reports. You're like, these are the things we said we needed to work on. Let's build an exercise for these. And it is much faster. And it's probably much more detailed and relevant to what you're actually trying to get to. And so we're trying to get from predictive analysis to to predictive intelligence, where we're not being reactive. We're using AI to look ahead in meaningful ways and to flag us for things that we really need to pay attention to. So we're moving from manual assessment, right? The piles of paperwork, the hordes of analysts, to condensing that to an AI, so that we can use the humans to do the things that humans have to do. So ethical issues, and there are a myriad of them. First, we have to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. We have to have a use case and project in mind before we start using taxpayer money on it, right? You got to properly vet your AI vendors. Are they selling you a product that actually exists, or are they selling you something that might exist in the future if you hand them money, right? It's a big question, and this has always been a problem with tech, but it's a bigger problem now with AI because things can look fancy when they're actually not. With any technology, we have to consider who is actually served by our solution to the problem and who specifically is left out. We have historically not asked that question when we develop tech solutions across the board, and particularly in emergency management. Who is not served by my solution and who is harmed by my solution? If you're not asking yourself that with every problem and coming up with an actual answer, that answer is going to come to you in a horrible way, right? There is tremendous power in water usage with AI. Tremendous. And I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying use it with purpose. Use it for things that are actually useful, because we have finite solutions to these. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the power issues. Bias is real. And part of the way, and we didn't talk about it in this, but using synthetic data to train models can help remove bias. Part of the reason there is bias is because humans are biased, and our models are learning things from humans. We can help reduce that by doing good profiles of our community, and making sure that we are accounting for all the people in our community. But bias, it can also help us get out of our own biased mindset by pointing out information that we're not aware of, right? We think we know something, and then the AI is like, whoa, wait, look at this. And you might not want to believe it, but it might be true, right? Because we have erosion of public trust. People, and you can see this in the chat, people do not trust AI. Because what does AI mean? Is it HAL? Is it max headroom? Like, what is AI? And why should we, or how do we trust it? And yet, our public is trusting it with their deepest secrets right now, right? People are using ChatGPT in lieu of mental health professionals with some success, right? So we don't trust it because we don't necessarily understand it. There's also a fear factor. There's a lot of fear of AI is going to replace my job. And I've had people say that to me. I've had emergency managers say that to me, and it doesn't have to, right? We're in a limited resource era, right? And if you're one emergency manager and you need 10 in your community, AI might help you make up some of that gap. And there's this privacy issue, right? Understand what is happening with your data. It is easy enough to make your own RAG, so your own little data set of your own data that is not publicly disclosed, not publicly available. But people aren't doing that. They're just YOLOing stuff into Chat GPT and now it's out there, right? But you have to be mindful of that. I saw some folks mention Copilot, right? Copilot runs internal on your system. If you're a Microsoft shop, it is only running on your stuff. I also saw they gave it to you and no one told you what to do with it, right? And that's a challenge. And some of that is understanding what you want to do and asking the AI how to do it. We're not going to go through this. You're going to get this in the slide deck, but this is a roadmap to implementation. How do you get from here to long term? And long term, we're only talking 3 years. So let's just touch on like 3 quick things and then get to all the questions that we can. This is Ryan.
Yeah, so what we do is usually put in like 3 examples of what's coming to your backyard very soon, right? This is like, hey, everyone's thinking we're in the Jetsons, but it's not 20 years. We're talking 2 to 5 years away, right? And so this huge push because of the power requirements, if you haven't heard this term SMRs before, I encourage you to Google that and get smart real quick because these things are going to start popping up all over the place. On the left-hand side, you see a traditional nuclear reactor. That powers 1 nuclear reactor. On the right-hand side, these small ones, it takes 3 SMRs to power the equivalent of what you see on the left. You're going to see control centers like this, but instead of controlling 1, they might control 100. And they may be parked all over the place. And you're not going to have those operators in your backyard to do joint exercises with because there's no more EPZ planning zones. So we kind of put people through an exercise here. Next slide. That's always fun. The second one we kind of jump to when we talk about AI are your new family members, which are coming very fast and furious. So if you haven't watched a bunch of YouTube videos about the humanoids, having races or kickboxing contests or whatever it may be, it's all fun and games today. But it's not as much about the hardware, which is really impressive where they're going, but it's about the AI that's driving the hardware that is then going to have relationships with you, your spouses, your kids, your dogs and cats, everybody in your family. And with that, you build relationships. Sarah talked about the mental health piece. There's some fascinating studies about people that much rather have a conversation with a robot than a person. And those types of relationships have a profound impact on our communities and our societies. And so if you then parlay that into scenario 3, which is, oh, well, what happens if now we've got 25% of our constituents and households that have humanoids? Well, guess what? They're bringing them with them to the shelter, right? It's just like pets are people. Well, humanoids are people in that future environment. Again, not 20 years away. Picture it 5 years away on the outside. You'll start to think about in your home within a couple of years, hey, I don't think we need that extra car. We should get a humanoid instead, right? Those decisions are coming very soon. But that, as an emergency manager, that lends itself to a ton of questions because we look at this as a force multiplier. You're going to, instead of having to worry about trying to collate 50 volunteers to work the next 7 days in a shelter, well, we can put these robots to work and they can feed off each other. And then, well, who owns the liability and what's the policy for that? And Sarah mentioned the power requirements and a whole bunch of a slew of kind of opportunities, but challenges we haven't really thought about or negotiated in working our shelter and evacuation operations. So those are always fun little exercises to go through, just food for thought. Next slide. Do we do another scenario or do we?
I'm going to add a comment on this because I want to make sure that this connection is super clear. We're talking about these humanoid robots costing less than $5,000 right now today. And so consider as we have a rapidly aging population, we don't have enough people to provide home help, right? And it is going to end up being more cost effective for people to have a humanoid in their home to help them with daily activities. It's already cheaper than a car in a lot of cases, and we're going to be at a point where your humanoid could also drive your car to the shelter or wherever you need to go. So it is going to increase people's ability to interact with the environment around them. So it's going to account for some of the access and functional needs pieces when you have a robot in your home who can help you and you take it to the shelter and it's going to help you there. So it's going to decrease some of the human required elements of sheltering because people will come with their own helper, but it's going to increase power requirements dramatically, right? All of them have to charge or they're all going to just like go dead. And then now we have a different problem. So like, and that's where that power piece comes in. That's where that SMR piece is. We already don't have enough power in places right now. And this is just becoming a larger problem. So there we go. There's your slide, Ryan.
No, I think we're good. I'm excited to get to the conversation piece. This is just, hopefully we've garnered some interest and you see that it's important to put eyes on target. This is the call to action for everybody here and emergency management writ large, right? We got to focus on, these crossroads. The one thing we kind of skipped over was for when we get to the planning piece, right? And the hazard vulnerability. We make this argument that, you know, we will no longer make decisions as humans in a disaster environment based on our gut and our experience. And if you do, you will be considered a liability. If you are not using AI in terms of your plan development, in terms of your execution within 5 years, you will be considered contributing to the reduction of our National Resilience Index. That's how profound this implementation is going to be when it comes to the technology and the data centers. So that goes back to Sarah's point about upskilling and reskilling. Like you really need to, there's no alternative here, right? You need to figure out how to implement and learn and integrate it today. That's what comes back to this urgency of adoption. And then, a couple pieces just before we get into the thought process here. We've read a lot about LLMs and we talked about that, right, Sarah? And there's kind of two things you need to think about. The first is when you engage with a GPT in particular, right, it'll ask you, there's a couple of really important checkboxes. I don't care if you're using Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT or pick your flavor of the day. There's really mostly two really important settings that you need to look at. By default, to Sarah's point, anything you put in there, especially on a free GPT, free means it's free for me in terms of that company, right? So when you engage with it, they own that data, right? So everything you're typing in there, they're going to use to train their model. So there's two settings. One, it says, we'll say something to the effect of, do not, use our conversations to train our data, right? That means keep my conversations private. The other one is a memory setting. And the memory piece, if you have an account and you've already signed in, it's not a free, that won't contribute toward the training of the model, but it does use that to help make your conversations more valuable to you because it's feeding off your previous answers and discourse between you and the GPT. So something to think about. It's really important to use this and understand the settings. And then also think about if it's hard to digest this cloud environment or what GPT means versus using a local LLM, think about it like in the day when we used to have a hard time moving to Office 365, right? IT said, no, we run our own Exchange servers. We manage our own mail. We can't have that, right? This is the same thing. So you're now, if you Google like private GPTs or secure GPTs, you'll see GPT for government, right? There's a Gemini for government now. There's a Chat GPT for government. So much like you pay for a 365 account for email, you'll pay for that in a secure environment. Everything you can put in there stays locked and secure for your IT shop. So that might help you as far as the implementation goes.
Yeah, and I do want, because somebody asked, like, are we just talking about LLMs? We're not. There's a couple of really interesting use cases. There's a company up here in Seattle that takes care of non-emergency calls for 911 centers and with AI. So a caller who calls non-emergency has a conversation with an AI, doesn't have to sit on hold. There's no giant call queues. Customer service went way up, the ratings did. And unexpectedly, the morale of the 911 center also went way up because they weren't always looking at giant call queues. There's a company in Europe, I can't remember the name right now, maybe Fairwind, something like that. But they have a 911 integration where you call 911 and then you can send pictures or video with that call where you're sitting in the call queue, and the AI analyzes the pictures and the video you sent, determines if it looks like it's really a real emergency or not, and it bumps you up in the queue based on that, right? So if you send a picture of someone bleeding all over the place, it's going to bump you up in the queue so that they can save a life. If you send a picture of a giant conflagration, it's going to bump you up in the queue so that they get more, and it can glob things together and not take 100 calls on the same thing once they get something going. So those are the kinds of things that are helping operationally just day to day right now. So let's go to This is our contact information. You'll be able to grab this later too. Um, I think it might be helpful because the scroll is out of control in the chat. It might be helpful to use the Q&A function to help us answer questions because I'm worried that I know I have lost things in the scroll. So, what questions do you have that we can answer in the 15 minutes that we have left? This is a record for us, by the way. We've never gotten through this in 15 minutes or in 45 minutes. Sorry. All right, let's see what's in the Q&A right now.
Sarah, there's
Uh,
one thing I saw while you're kind of cherry picking things.
yeah.
It kind of blew me away the other day was this real-time analytics. The scenario was for 911 callers, but the um, the the accuracy blew me away in terms of they were doing things like fear detection in terms of the voice, the emotional output, aside from like the pictures and the video thing you were talking about. But it was looking at things like potential alcohol intake of the caller. It just really kind of bucketed those callers to prioritize that for, and then things like language translation, all that stuff in real, really, really impressive stuff.
So a couple of things I do see in the chat. I scrolled up a little bit. Overcoming bias. So part of overcoming bias is good prompting, right? And when I say prompting, I'm not like talking about type one line into your favorite chat client. I'm talking about giving it all of the instructions that you want to get the outcome you need. We did some work at the college with visual data, right? We told it to make images of emergency management students, and we got hilariously a bunch of young women in striped shirts with long red hair and a bunch of Asian kids with glasses, right? That was what we got initially. And so we had to really stack those instructions in there to get the outcome that we wanted, which was to be more reflective of our students. I would like that was just a thought experiment, but I would take demographic data. Like if I were going to do that today with a real prompt, I would tell it the demographics of the people that we're representing, right? And then have it generate that. The other one I saw in here is convincing agency IT departments to turn it on. Uh, Use the government versions of these things, right? If you're a Microsoft shop and you're using government Microsoft, Copilot's already there. And if they've got it turned off, which they might, there's a cost with that. But Copilot, let me just tell you, Copilot makes beautiful PowerPoint presentations. This is not one of them. This one was not made by Copilot. It was made by me, and I make ugly PowerPoint presentations. Copilot makes beautiful ones. But it's using the right tools for the job, right? Convince them to turn it on. Well, for what purpose? What do you want to use it for? Go back and build that business case and that use case, and then show them like, here's the thing we already have access to. It's already made for government. It already complies with all of the governmenty things we have to comply with. Here's what we want to do with it. And I think that if we can say we can either do more work, get more done, check off more of our to-do list, or we can better utilize the people we have. We're in a situation right now where that becomes a much more viable option because we don't have any money right now. I mean, we have less money than the no money we used to have.
Money, what is money? That's all gone. So one thing I wanted to kind of pick out of here, Sarah, was somebody asked about the risks, right? So I can answer this 10 different ways, but I think it's kind of universal. It doesn't just mean emergency management. This acceleration, I think, is profound, right? In terms of how AI is being not only rolled out, but being adopted. But I would say probably the biggest risk as humans is this over reliance on AI and automation because it becomes so ingratiated in our day to day. We don't even know we're using it half the time. But like I just think about like the Gen Alphas coming in, like my kids, I can distinctly remember the day I introduced them to AI, and then you can't turn them off, right? Like it becomes part of their ethos in terms of how they learn, how they write, how they implement solutions. It's just something that, there'll always be that day before and the day after we rolled out generative AI. And that reliance piece, whether it's incorporating the bias or otherwise, is something that is going to be very important for us to train and be cognizant of as we look at those answers, as we filter those solutions. But I don't think it's like saying, it's like the kids today saying, wow, Dad, you lived before the internet. I can't imagine what life was like then, that now they're going to say, I lived before AI. So that's just that's for me, that's high on that risk factor. But great
I'm gonna,
question.
yeah, I'm going to address Suzanne's question. I put it in the chat, but about message language translation. So part of this challenge is you're probably using an LLM that is in English, right? And so you're asking it to do something. It does word matching, right? LLMs are just math at the end of the day about how words fit together. It doesn't know anything. It just knows the math of how words fit together. And so it is a language translation is challenging for a couple of reasons. It does concept matching, but it doesn't know the grammar of other languages. But when I've done demos, I've done some live demos in front of live audiences where I've told it to take an English message, translate it to some other language. The grammar was horrible, but people understood what to do. And I think that we have to really focus on our intent, right? If our intent is we need people to evacuate, and they will understand to evacuate, even though our translation is clunky. They understand that they need to evacuate in this direction because of this hazard, right? And yes, so culture and language, and I've done it in multiple languages, and every time people are like, well, it's ugly, or it's not how we would say it, but I understood what I needed to do. That should be the solution we're going for in emergencies. When we're not in an emergency, we're trying to do others. The other thing I would say is good messaging is done before an incident ever happens, right? You should be sitting down right now, looking at your hazards, pre-scripting your messages so that they are ready to go. So then you just update date, time, location, whatever it is, and launch them. That has been public information practice for as long as I've been a PIO, which is a long time now. We've always said pre-do your messages, but people don't. They're like, nothing bad will happen here. And then something bad happens. They're like, oh, I don't know how to write a message, right? And so there's a lot of these. So I encourage you, Suzanne, to look at the prompt that we just released that is under Creative Commons. I know it's 67 pages, but you can load it into your favorite LLM. It's very easy to do. It walks you through the question and answer. It walks you through the languages. It is not hard to do at all. It took a while to get it set up. And that's what I mean by good prompting, right? That was a multi-person, multi-week effort that came out with a very long process that anybody can use. But a 67-page prompt is too overwhelming for most people. They want to sit down and they want to type in a sentence and they want magic to happen. And there is no magic. There's just math and good instructions.
And then one thing I'd add to that is, and I kind of saw a little bit in the chat, people are just bombarded with the Mag 7 solutions when it comes to the LLMs out there today and the AI solutions. But you have to, once you start doing a deep dive, there is a whole extensive world that you have to marry up what you're trying to look for and accomplish with the right tool, right? So, for example, if you're not familiar with the platform Hugging Face, take a look at that, right? So we focus on kind of the big top five, and their different variations in numbers, right? GPT 3, 4, 5. There's over 2 million LLMs around the globe today, all tailored to specific use cases, trained on different data, based on whatever discipline you might need. So you need to be able to leverage those, because that might be where your real answer is versus trying to use one of these generalized global GPT solutions. So something to think about as far as when you expand your universe about how you're using different AI tools. Good
Yeah, all
stuff.
right. So yeah,
Keep going, Sarah.
we've got
Look
a
at these
little bit of
questions.
time here. So if anybody
Yeah.
else has anything, or if I missed something in the scroll, there's so much scroll.
Well, look at that, Sarah. Dedicate AI courses in
I know,
emergency
right?
management. What does that mean to
Yes.
you?
Yeah, so Ryan teaches that course for me actually. So we have one in our degree program that'll roll out, and we have a continuing education one because that is like that's a request we get, and Ryan teaches it for me. So all
Every
right.
delivery is different, right? Because it changes every day. That's the
Yeah,
hardest thing.
it is. It is
Um,
really hard because people want to know what is, and we're like, well, we'll let you know tomorrow. Like it changes so fast.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They say, what is the saying, right? Like if you invest in a 4-year university today, everything you learn will be obsolete in 5 years. Like everything we teach in a course in AI is obsolete in 5 days. Something new has come along or a new version, right? The QR codes again, Sarah,
Yeah, I'm
those are
actually gonna
trusted
I'm
there.
gonna I'm gonna just copy and paste the links right into the
Add
chat.
that. Yeah,
That'll
okay.
be easier. And then you'll get them as soon as we're done with this. I'll have it push out. Oh boy, that's an ugly link. I'll have it push the presentation out too, so that everybody can get it.
Yeah. Hey,
And we're
one of the
always
things,
happy to
just a
talk.
little,
Like,
yeah, speaking of talking, right? So I've noticed this too. Like, I don't think we've culturally shifted yet from the Google generation that we are, right? Like typing into the search prompt. And I still see a lot of people not using the multimodal aspect of AI. And what I mean by that is um, try it for like 1 week. Do not type into AI. Like, don't use it as a search feature, right? So download whichever AI app you want. I encourage people to use the phone because it's more difficult on the laptop. You get distracted. But turn on the voice and just talk to it, right? Use the verbal two-way communication. Talk to it like it's a human being, your counterpart. Ask it questions. Let it respond to you, but don't type to it. See how that changes your universe, how you engage with it. And then I think I put in the chat earlier, like be pretty blunt and push back, right? Like tell it like you are so wrong. I completely disagree with that answer. I think you need to revisit that. I can prove to you that that's wrong. Like really push back on some of the answers. Tell it you're offended. That's a completely biased response. You need to think twice about before you say that to me again. Like just have a regular conversation with it, but don't feel like uh every time you're polite to it. This was another thing, Sarah. There's some math scores out there, like if you're nice to AI, like thank you, blah blah blah, like you're costing the
yeah,
taxpayer money
yeah,
because the
yeah.
charges are through the roof. But
Yep.
honestly, do push back on it, and you'll be surprised at some of the responses that you get. Oh, I am, and they're polite too. Some of them are good. Hey, I did a deeper dive. I'm sorry, I was totally wrong. And this is actually more accurate.
There's two things that I would do if you're going to experiment with an LLM, whatever your favorite client is. I use different ones for different things, right? Gemini or Copilot. Or I actually don't really use ChatGPT that much. I use the OpenAI developer side, which you can get some free access to. Um, because I don't want to put my stuff in there. But use natural language. Don't overthink. Don't try and think like a computer. It's designed to interact with humans. So just have a conversation with the client, but tell it to show its sources in its answers, right? If you tell it right off the bat, show your sources, you eliminate some of those hallucinations. Now, and sometimes it doesn't do well. I have some epic fails from show your sources where it showed me sources and then I dove down and it made up sources. It finally told me it made those up because it thought that those I would like those, right? That was an older version of ChatGPT, like 6 months ago. We've come light years since then. But I think that those things are important. The show your sources piece is really important because then you can evaluate also where it came from. Did it come from someplace that you trust? And does it make sense to you? You're still evaluating that. So anybody's ever taken a class at EMI/NDEMU, there's the whole fake city state thing. I can't remember the name of the document anymore, but the ISD, the incident support document. I dumped that into a client. I made a bot for it. I told it to find all the conflicts in that plan. And it's hilarious how many conflicts it found in that one plan that, if somebody were bored, they could go fix it on behalf of NDEMU, but it's fun. All right. So we have like 1 minute left. Any last burning questions? I invite you to join us on the Discord. Reach out. We can obviously talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but we won't today. But we're happy to talk about it. We're using it. We're not saying I sometimes think people probably think we're the hype people. I think we're more of the reality people. We're like, this is where it's going, and we've got to embrace it because we can do better work as emergency managers with it.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sarah. Thanks
Yeah.
everybody. Look, I'll say this in closing. You guys are defining the future of emergency management, especially when it comes to AI. So feed off each other, join the Discord. Everyone's asking a lot of questions about where do I go? How can I learn more? Well, this is it. Like invent it. You are it. You learn as you go and share, and you invent the future. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. Keep doing great things out there, protecting yourself, your family, and your communities. And thanks for everything you do every day. Appreciate it.
All right. I'll see a bunch of you in Kentucky next month.